So today I'm going to disclose something that a lot of people have been asking about for a lot of years. And although we have publicly announced this, most people have either missed it or just failed to read it. And it is the basis of our name, 221B Tactical. So today I'm going to tell you about how the name came about and the meaning behind not only the name, but the tagline, Eliminate the Impossible. So when I first started this company, I was by myself. I was a police officer working full time, and I didn't know anything about sourcing fabrics or getting materials from overseas or anything like that. I didn't know anything about business. I'd gone to medical school and then I became a police officer. So I didn't know anything about business. So I had taken a course with a gentleman out in California. It was a business development kind of mindset kind of course. And I remember that he had said in the class when they were going around, everyone was talking about, oh, what do you do? What do you do? He had said that he owns a business that has to do with fabric and textiles. And he was in New York City. And at the time, I was living in New Jersey. So I went to the class roster and I looked him up and I called him up and I said, hey, remember me? I'm the guy from that course in California. And of course he did. And I said, listen, I have an idea. And I believe that if we could bring this idea to life, we're going to be able to make $1 million. And that was a bold statement to say. This is someone who was older than me, quite a bit senior to me. He was an established businessman running a multi-million-dollar business. And I was a pretty much broke police officer who was probably seemed like a kid to him, and calling him up saying, I got $1 million idea. But I had no way to bring it to life. So he invited me to New York City, and I sat down and I told him about the idea for the Maxx-Dri Vest. And at the time, I didn't know how I was going to make it. I just knew I had to create something for police officers to wear under their body armor that would help them from soaking in their own sweat every single day, and that would allow some airflow and some ventilation. And I told him all I needed to do was create a material that would create a little bit of separation between their undershirt and their body armor vest. And that was it. If we could figure that out, we'll be millionaires. He, not being a police officer and never having, worn a bulletproof vest or body armor in his life, had no idea what I was talking about, and also had no idea of how uncomfortable it is to wear body armor. Only someone who has worn body armor for 10, 12, 16 hours can tell you that. So he kind of was a little skeptical about, is this actually a serious problem for that many people? And I assured him, yes. And that was part of that class we took, was identifying these things in our life, in our society, that other people miss, that are cognitively blind to. So he was at least believing me because we'd both been through this course and both of our lives had completely changed having taken this course. So he said, okay, let's get to work. And that's how he started introducing me to his contacts overseas. And because we couldn't find a material here stateside, we knew we had to create a material. And to create a material, we had to go overseas because the cost to create a material here in the US was so high. And he introduced me to a lot of people. I got on a plane for 15 hours. The plane I missed a flight, so I got diverted, and it was crazy. So anyway, about 24 hours later, I arrived where our factory would ultimately be. And I was able to work with that team there and had to develop a brand new material, which ultimately became the material for the Maxx-Dri Vest. And there's a whole story about different iterations of what I tried to make to get the vest to have some separation from the undershirt. It included tennis balls cut in half, ping pong balls, racket balls, it just whatever. Those ideas didn't work. So then the Maxx-Dri Vest material came about, brought it back here. I cut it into the fabric and into the shape. I didn't know how to sew edges, so I used duct tape, and there you go. That was the first iteration of the Mark I Maxx-Dri Vest. So while this was all going on, his business partner, this guy from the class, his name is Brad, he's my current business partner. His business partner named Sean was helping us with certain things, connecting us to the factory and getting things ready for when the product took off. We would need to have some logistics in place. And he was really smart with business and stuff like that. So he kind of was helping us on board as like a third partner. And we got to the point where the product was getting developed and it was getting manufactured and it was on its way. And we'd gotten a prototype and we'd gotten a sample, and we got 5 samples, because you just get sample after sample after sample when you're creating and developing a product. And they just keep sending you versions that you got to keep telling them what to change and how to change it. And during this time, Sean one day said, well, what are we going to name the company? We got to name the company. And so while I was trying to name the Maxx-Dri Vest, because I didn't have a name for that either, we were trying to name the company. And I guess in conversation, it had come up at some point that I was a Sherlock Holmes fan. And then Brad told me that, Sean, was a Sherlock Holmes fan. And the number, and I'd always remembered an article I read about business that talked about how BMW came up with the model numbers for their vehicles. And I read this article like 20 years ago. So forgive me if I'm butchering it, but the long and short of it was they found that the combination of three numbers and a letter were was the combination that was most sticky to people in their minds. So that's how, now, if I recall, they said when the cars were in Europe, for some reason, they didn't have this naming structure. But when the cars started coming over to the US, they came up with this structure. I don't know if that's 100% right. Someone can look it up and drop in the comment if I'm right or wrong. But so they said three numbers and a letter. So that had come up in conversation, I think at some point. I don't know if it was with Brad or Sean or someone else. And so I was trying to think through things. And then Sean one day came up with 221B. And where did 221B come from? 221B Baker Street was Sherlock Holmes's address in London in the fictional books. And that was it. 221B. I was like, this is great. So we kind of put it down. We started doing some graphics work. And there we go. It was it. Three letters, three numbers, and a letter. So if you know the BMW models were, if you know BMW 550i, 745 or 750i, that was the model names. I think they've changed today, but they're kind of along the same lines. So that's what we did. We went with 221B Tactical. He was a Sherlock Holmes fan, so was I. Brad presented it. I said, great, let's go with 221B. And of course, tactical for the space we're in. That would soon come to change many years later as the company started to shift. That's another video. So 221B Tactical it was. And then the Maxx-Dri Vest, that was a simple, what's the purpose of the product? Is to maximize dryness under your body armor. We wanted to give you the maximum amount of comfort and the maximum amount of breathability and the maximum amount of airflow. So we used Maxx-Dri, and because of a naming availability, we couldn't use Maxx-Dri with one X. We had to do two X's. So that's where the two X's for Maxx-Dri came to be. And ultimately, we had to create a design for those X's, and those X's we had a graphic designer create the Maxx-Dri and the 221B Tactical logo. Fast forward many, many years later, and Elon Musk buys Twitter and renames it X. And the X that was used for Twitter was the same exact X that our graphic designer back in 2014 used to create the X's, the two X's for the Maxx-Dri Vest. And if anyone wants to contest that story, you can go back and look at any products we sold back in 2014. There's people who still own them and have them, and they have that label inside of them that say Maxx-Dri, and you can see that same X is the same X for what was formerly Twitter. The tagline. How'd the tagline come about? Well, there was a story in Sherlock Holmes that I recall reading, and I had to go back to it. I didn't remember it because I read all his books when I was a little kid. And one of the things that I remember when I had started thinking about the idea for Maxx-Dri Vest when I was talking to people was that when I had asked people about not sweating while wearing body armor, everyone had said, that's impossible. That's impossible. It's impossible not to soak in your own sweat while you're wearing body armor. The body armor is heavy. It's hot when you're outside in the elements, even in the wintertime. It's just hot. So when people heard me saying I wanted to try to come up with something to make it so you don't suffer while you're wearing body armor, everyone, virtually everyone was like, oh, it's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. What do you doing? It's impossible. And I remember in my mind, I was thinking, I have to eliminate that word impossible from people's vocabulary. I have to get people from saying that's impossible to how can I make it possible? And that was part of that course I'd met Brad in. It was shifting your mindset. And that's why that course changed my life and made me a multimillionaire, is shifting the way you look at the world and shifting your listening and shifting your language. And I said, I'm not going to use the word impossible anymore. I'm not going to use the word impossible. I'm going to figure out a way to wear body armor for 10, 12 hours and not sit there smelling, stinking, soaking in my own sweat for 12 hours and having my vest soaked with sweat and feeling horrible and miserable and having it be unbearable. I said, I'm going to No way. I'm not going to accept that. It's impossible. And that's when I started working on what would become the Maxx-Dri Vest. And the exact quote from that Sherlock Holmes book, and I remembered it, but I remembered it wrong. So think about that. The exact quote was, when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And I remember reading that, and I just remember thinking about that in everyday life when you have a certain situation and you're trying to figure out like what happened. Like you're at a crime scene and you're or whatever. When I was a police officer, if you just eliminate the impossible, then all that's left is what is possible. What's the truth? What could be? What could be when you've eliminated everything else in the impossible? So I remember reading that, and then I remembered hearing what all the fellow cops I was talking to, who many of them were laughing at me and whatever. And I said, "That's it. We're eliminating the impossible. We are eliminating." I just like literally eliminate that word and eliminate it from people's mindset. And now, as we move forward in today's day and age, 2026, here we are, technically 11, 12 years from the start of the company. Our new mission ready mindset and our new mission ready, really mission statement to keep everyone, whether you're on the job, off the job, civilian, law enforcement, doesn't matter, mission ready for no matter what is going to happen to you. You have to eliminate any concept of impossible in your world. You can be prepared. You should be prepared for any situation, any given moment, and not say, "Oh, it's impossible. That's impossible. That's not possible." And it sits right into our whole mission ready mindset, mission ready lifestyle, where 221B is going now. And you saw the video prior to this; it explains the whole mission ready mindset and why we're going to that, because most people are a complete hot mess and not ready for shit. And so that's it. So that's the story of 221B Tactical and Eliminate the Impossible, and how the Maxx-Dri Vest got its name. It's been a hell of a ride. And man, to think like, 11, 12 years went like that. I could remember sitting in my garage with no heat in New Jersey, just with a pair of metal scissors, like an old pair of metal scissors where it was like the blades were silver, but the handle part was black, but it wasn't black. It was just like the metal painted black to make it look like it had a handle. And they were just ice cold. And I remember cutting that initial mesh fabric that I had developed overseas. And I remember to myself, my fingers were freezing. I didn't know how to sew. There was fabric all over the place. I was in this garage with no heat, freezing in New Jersey, and opening pieces of duct tape to put it along the neckline to, you know, make, I couldn't sew seams or couldn't sew edging. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm going to have to wear this at work and people are going to be looking at me with, holes for the sleeves and holes for the neck cut out crudely with these metal scissors with my freezing fingers and then covered in duct tape. And I, for a split second, I was like thinking, man, people are going to like look at me like I'm an idiot. And I quickly caught myself and I said, I don't care. I don't care how crazy people think I am, how much of an idiot I look like. I just knew that when I got this product dialed in, it was going to change lives. And one day, all of them they were going to be wearing it. And fast forward, just literally less than a year later, that was the case. And it just goes to show you, don't ever worry about what people are going to think. Don't worry about what people say. Don't worry about what you might look like. Don't worry about any of that. And you almost have to have that. I guess it's ego, but it's almost just really like just not giving a shit about what anyone thinks. And there's a great book I talk about, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And it truly is just that, because you don't realize how much you giving a fuck about what other people think and then what they might say and might do, whatever, how much that's holding you back. And if I had even remotely concerned myself with that, 221B Tactical would not be here today. We wouldn't have changed hundreds of thousands of lives around the world. And from a business and financial position, I wouldn't be where I am today had I worried about what other people were going to think about me and say or whatever. So that was the in that beginning stage of 221 Be Tactical, coming up with the name, coming up with the tagline, eliminate the impossible, I think one of the most important things, which at the time felt impossible, was to not care about what anyone else thought. And that was the catalyst. That was it. That was the difference that made the difference. And I made it happen. Not care about people saying it's impossible, not care what people might think when they saw me with some jerry rigged MacGyver duct tape contraption on in the locker room. Not worry about any of it. Not worry about any of it. So that's my advice to you. Hope you enjoyed the story. If you have any questions, comments, drop them below. Subscribe if you feel like subscribing and all that. And if you have a story about something that you did in your lifetime where it was born from not giving a fuck about what anyone else thought, and it led to you being in a different place, a good place, a better place, drop it below. Share with the community, because that's what we're all here for. That's the whole part of the mission ready mindset, is to share and be a community. So thanks for watching. See you next time.